Boitaca was a renowned architect and engineer who flourished in Portugal in the first half of the 16th century, designing some of the most notable Portuguese structures, mostly designing churches and monasteries. Justa Rodrigues Pereira had first founded the Jesus Monastery or Mosteiro de Jesus outside of the old town of Setúbal, which was funded by King John II, who commissioned Master Diogo de Boitaca to build the monastery's church in 1490. This monastery is one of his first recorded works and also one of the first structures identified with the Manueline architectural style. This architectural style incorporates late Gothic elements with early Renaissance elements, along with twisted columns and navigational symbols. His next work was to design the Jeronimos monastery in Belém, Portugal. This would become his most well-known work, as well as one of Portugal's most important structures and the Manueline style's most renowned building. He had originally designed a complex with 4 monasteries, which would have been 4 times the size of the current structure. Between 1502 and 1516, Diogo Boitaca worked on this building, finishing the columns and outer walls before being called away to work on other projects. Eventually, another architect, João de Castillo, gradually transitioned the style from Manueline to Plateresco. While working on the Jeronimos monastery, Diogo Boitaca was also assigned to several other projects. In 1507, he was assigned to renovate the Coimbra Santa Cruz monastery. He was in charge of the Manuel's churches and the chapter houses design. He reduced the church's internal space and made various other changes. In 1513, he returned to finish the job. In the same year, near the city of Sintra, he built the Jeronimite monastery of Nossa Senhora da Pena. He is also mentioned in the 1509 at the monastery of Batalha, where he may or may not have been the master of the works. He built the pillars of the imperfect chapels, which were carved with Manueline themes. In 1511, Diogo constructed the abattoirs of Coimbra, with Mateus Fernandes improved the bridge of Ponte de Santa Clara over the river Mondego and began to build canals along the river.
Jeronimos Monastery, or Mosteiro de Jeronimos, is one of Diogo de Boitaca's masterpieces and one of Portugal's oldest architectures. It is located in Lisbon and has been standing there since 1495. During that year, there was only the Church of Santa Maria de Belém, and the monastery was then built in 1501 by Diogo de Boitaca under King Manuel's I order, and the construction took 100 years to finish. The monastery is famous for many reasons. One of them is that a lot of Portuguese famous people were buried there, such as Vasco da Gama and Luís de Camões. Besides that, the monastery is also a symbol of Portugal's modernizations, which is during the period of time where people from the West travel around the world to find more land and culture. The church consists of 2 main buildings, the Church of Santa Maria and the monastery. The church is where the graves are located, and to enter the buildings there are many entrances. The first entrance, the south portals or entrance, is the most famous because of how intricate and complex the design is, even though it's not the main entrance. While the west portal is one of the most prominent examples of Gothic style transitioning to Renaissance style architecture. And the monastery, on the other hand, is where the monks lived back then. This area shows a lot of amalgamations of Portuguese, Moorish, and Eastern style motifs in architecture. The monastery was donated to the Hieronymus monks, who was tasked to pray for the king's eternal soul, and they also provided spiritual assistance to navigators and sailors who departed from the nearby port, Port Castello. And in 1883, the monastery was secularized and the title was transferred to Real Casa Pia de Lisboa, and it became the new parochial church for the new civil parish of Santa Maria de Belém. Because it was secularized, the monastery was abandoned and the building started to deteriorating. Even the furnitures and other stuff that was kept inside the monastery disappeared during the transfer or even stolen. But soon, in 1860, the restoration started under the supervision of the architect Rafael Silva e Castro and Domingos Parente da Silva. Besides them, there were many architects and sculptors that worked in restoring the monastery, such as Valentim José Correa, Samuel Barret, Ramboa and Chinati, Raimundo Valadas, Costa Mota, Abel Manta and Ricardo Leon, and maybe many more. The monastery is now Portugal's and Lisbon's one of most famous tourist attraction, but unfortunately, due to the large numbers of tourists, it endangers the conditions of the buildings because of how old it is. The monastery is actually one of the prime examples for Manuelan style or late Gothic Portuguese style. This style was popular and developed during the Portuguese Renaissance era or exploration era. The name was inspired by King Manuel I who built the monastery. While the style is considered as Gothic, Manuelan has its own unique Portuguese characteristics to it. It was heavily influenced by the success of Portuguese sailors' exploration and took a lot of inspiration from East Indian temples, symbol of Christianity, botanical motifs, and maritime motifs such as aquatic creatures or ship ornaments. These styles also show a transition from Gothic to Renaissance style due to the period it was made and restored. For example, the West Portal previously mentioned. With vaulted ceilings and sophisticated decorative elements, the signs reflects the ethereal and royal commissions that characterize the era in which it was built.